Howdy, everybody. It's time for another podcast of Thinking Beyond, Conversations with Strategic Thinkers. And I am David Flint, the usual podcast person here. And this time, across the internet from me, instead of across the table, is my co-host, Joan Quintana. Howdy, Joan.
Howdy, David. Good to be here. Virtual.
Yeah, this is crazy having to do all this through the internet.
Yeah, it's a little crazy, but at least we can do it. So that's wonderful.
Yeah, it's amazing. The world suddenly went online and now we're all talking with each other via the internet.
Yeah.
So today we are getting on a Zoom conversation with a guest that I'm looking forward to. Who is that, Joan?
So today we are hosting Seth Sullivan. He is the director of the Zachary Leadership Program at Texas A&M University. It's a really interesting program there that is in the engineering college, pretty exclusive within the college. And Seth actually uses the VROL framework there, and I guess you've been involved with that program for a number of years now. So should be a really interesting conversation to just learn how Seth and the students there at Texas A&M and in engineering are benefiting from the VROL framework as they learn some leadership skills.
Yeah, and Seth has a really interesting background too, which I hope we'll be able to get into. So it'll be good.
Well, great. So I'm looking forward to it. Let's get started.
All right. So, howdy, Seth. How are you?
Howdy, David. I'm doing great, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing okay. And I suppose we should let everybody listening know that this is being recorded during the COVID-19 shelter-in-place period of time. So we are far apart from each other, connected through the internet, having this conversation. So life is a little bit different right now, right?
Life is totally different, but aren't we thankful for things like Zoom and computers and cell phones? Otherwise, I don't know what we'd be doing.
It's kind of crazy. I am in some respects, I think I'm a little bit more connected with certain people than I was before all this happened, because it has to be more intentional.
That's right. I've totally seen that. I've seen it with neighbors. We've had conversations with people that live on our street that we haven't talked to in 3 years, and we've talked to them multiple times in the past week. And we've been staying 6 to 10 feet away, of course, but just been having some nice conversations. So it's been pretty good.
Yeah, there are certain aspects about this I'm kind of liking. I gotta admit it. I hate that it's going on, but making the lemonade out of lemons, there's actually quite a lot of stuff to, I think, appreciate here. I
think so. And I mean, it's there are a lot of people that are in trouble. I mean, you saw the jobless claims news today that, just skyrocketed. And so I'm not at all to make light of that, but I can see some silver lining to the situation. I think that's making all of us just slow down a little bit and reevaluate and reprioritize and some of those kind of things. So at least in our life, we can see that.
Yeah, you were saying before we started recording that you've suddenly got all this family time that you didn't have before.
So that's right. Suddenly got a ton of family time. We've been playing some Monopoly, been working some jigsaw puzzles, and hanging out together a little bit. So that's been kind of fun. Nobody's killed each other yet, so that's good.
That's really good.
Yeah, that's really good.
Well, thanks for coming on with me today and doing this podcast. I wanted to talk to you because you're the director of the Zachary Leadership Program there at Texas A&M, where we're both part of the faculty. And that's a really interesting program, and I would like you to give our listeners some background about that program, what it's trying to do, and who participates and how long it's been going, just the total rundown.
Oh, sure. It's kind of one of those things that's hard for me to give a quick snapshot of, but I'll do my best just because there's so much to it. But this program was originally the vision of a CEO and business owner named John Zachary, who owns a construction and engineering firm in San Antonio. And he felt like the engineers at A&M and really across the country were getting a great technical education and learning all of the engineering things that they needed to, but there was a lot missing too. And so some of that was on kind of interpersonal skills and even intrapersonal skills, kind of knowing yourself and self-awareness and things like that. And some of it was on things like the free enterprise system and business fundamentals and other things that would just give engineers who are coming out of school and were aspiring to be leaders in industry or in their communities just a more rounded, I think, understanding and perspective of kind of the world and the organizations that they would be joining. So that was kind of the founding vision of the program, that they would create something that would help engineers with that would give them some of that other stuff that maybe they weren't getting in their other engineering classes. So I'm, as the director, I get to teach a series of 5 classes. It's just for engineering students, and we take 32 a year, and they move through these series of 5 classes, and we try to move through all those kind of things that go along with engineering. So we don't do very much math in our program, but we do a lot of conversation and critical thinking and reflection and those kind of things.
And when you say 5 classes, I think people need to understand that that's 1 class per semester, right? So
that's right. Yep.
Yeah, this is a 5 semester block that the students sign up for.
That's right. Yeah. And at the end, they get an academic certificate, which is like a minor. So it's something extra that goes on their transcript that shows that they've taken these 5 extra classes, and they take them in series. And that's kind of what I intended to say. I think they start as sophomores and finish at the end of their senior year. But yeah, it's 5 extra classes they take over the course of 5 semesters. So 1 at a time.
And then how do you select students for the program? With only 32 in a college of engineering with tens of thousands, how do you narrow that down to 32?
Yeah, it's, we do an application and an interview. So that's kind of the mechanics of it. But we also try to do a good job of informing students what the program's all about at the onset, because it's not for everybody. Not everybody will want to do something where they do some self-awareness work and some reflection, and they learn, work with other people closely and try different things to put them on the edge of their comfort zones, or even learn the business basics. Some of them are really content just focusing on the engineering stuff. So our first step is really just trying to inform students kind of what the program is all about. And then those who are interested fill out an application, and then we down select and we do some interviews. And then from the interviews, we choose the 32 each year.
Right. So tell me, and whoever is listening to this podcast, a little bit about your background and how you got involved with this program.
Oh, sure. I'd be happy to. So I studied industrial distribution at A&M. I was class of 2001. So that was in the College of Engineering, but it had some business classes mixed in. 9/11 happened while I was finishing my last semester. I took 1 little victory lap, David. I took 1 extra semester. It had nothing to do with wanting an extra football season, I promise. It was just needing a few more credits. But 9/11 happened, and it kind of changed the way I thought about what I wanted to do with life. So I ended up going to the Bush School here at A&M and getting a master's in international affairs right after undergrad. And then from there, I had the opportunity to go and work as an intelligence analyst at CIA for about 8 years. And as part of that, while I was in that job, I went back and got an MBA, and then I left. I worked in private sector consulting for a little while, mainly because our family wanted to be back in Texas. We didn't want to live in a DC area for forever. We'd had our kids and were wanting to raise them down here close to grandparents and things like that. And so I was doing the consulting thing, and it was just kind of struggling with it a little bit, not really feeling like it was what I wanted to be doing long term, but I wasn't sure, really what would be next. And then I heard about the Zachary Leadership Program actually through my MBA program that I had finished. So they reached back out to alumni and said, hey, A&M Engineering is starting this program that's designed to help engineers in all these different ways I described earlier. And they want somebody to be the director who preferably has an engineering degree from A&M and has worked outside of academia for 10 to 15 years, doing some different things to bring in a different perspective into the classroom, and somebody who has a heart for college students and really wants to serve as kind of a mentor and a coach to help empower them. And I just thought, oh my goodness, that's me. That's amazing, and they want somebody with an MBA from the school that I had gone to, which was UTSA down in San Antonio, because a lot of the Zachary execs had actually gone there, and the leadership program was built in some ways on some of the leadership things that they'd been doing as part of that program. And so anyway, there were just a bunch of crazy check boxes that in my own life didn't really seem to be aligned with anything or to make any sense, but all of a sudden it fit perfectly for this position. So that's how I found out about it, and I've really enjoyed doing it. I've been doing this for about 3.5 years now. The program started in 2016, so I joined when it was kind of one semester in, and have been with it ever since.
Yeah, a true confession moment for the listeners. I've been involved with the Zachary Leadership Program as kind of a guest lecturer every semester since it started, and I remember when you came in, and that was a good thing.
Well, I'm glad you think so. Yeah, you've got more tenure with the program than I do. So
yeah, just by like one semester. So
yeah,
but it's a very interesting program, and I think you've done some very creative things trying to accomplish those goals that you were listing off with the students and everything. But before we zero in on ZLP a little bit more, wow, you've done CIA intelligence analyst work and some consulting. I mean, okay, you probably can't tell us everything, but were there any things that you could tell us that would be particularly interesting about some of the work you've done in the past?
No. No, as an analyst,
you'd have to kill me,
right? Yeah, no. As an analyst, it was a really interesting job. I really liked it. Our job was to try to figure out what was going on some particular national security issue that we were working to help our U.S. policymakers make good decisions about how the U.S. could defend our interests or protect the homeland or whatever it was. So, I got to work there, David, from 2003 to 2011, and most of my time was spent on the counterterrorism mission. And so it was really interesting. It felt really fulfilling. It was very engaging. They gave us, even young, new employees, a lot of responsibility, and I got to travel a little bit. And I think one of the things, I was actually just thinking about this this past week, but one of the things I liked best was that sometimes foreign countries would want to get briefings from U.S. intelligence analysts, and so I got invited to go to a few different foreign countries and would give a briefing. There'd be a translator who'd be translating it into the language of the host country there or whatever. And I really enjoyed doing things like that. It felt good to get their perspective and to hear, kind of what they were thinking about. And sometimes conversations with them, changed the way we were thinking about certain issues and things like that. So anyway, it was, it was a lot of problem solving. It was a lot of critical thinking. It was kind of like maybe some of the things that you do in the business school there, where there was a problem that didn't necessarily have a clear-cut solution or obvious answer. And it was our job to think through it and to try to put some rigor, to our analysis to try to come up with as complete a picture as we could of what was going on with a particular terrorist group or terrorist threat or something like that. So really, really cool work. I love the people, and it was I'm feel fortunate to have had the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting. And of course, in my head, I've always got VREAL running in my head. What you're describing is eroding and enabling factors.
Yeah, that's right.
Of trying to identify and prioritize eroding and enabling factors related to the value of national security.
That's exactly right, David. That's really interesting to think about. And even I had the opportunity to be part of the National Counterterrorism Center when it started. So it was a brand new thing, and back in the mid 2000s, it was it was a little bit controversial because they pulled people from all these different agencies and put them together and said, okay, now you're going to be working on counterterrorism. And there were all kinds of bureaucratic issues and turf battles and things like that. But
Sure.
it'd be fascinating to think about the National Counterterrorism Center kind of in the VREAL model and the value that they provided, the rareness of it, what could erode it, what could enable it, the longevity of it. It's still around, so, being a government agency, that might have something to do with it, but would still be really interesting to think about it through that framework. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, maybe someday we'll have to sit down outside of the podcast and think about that a little bit.
Let's get a cup of coffee and map that out.
Yeah, but you reminded me of an old joke. Theologians for centuries have been debating whether or not there's eternal life, but we have solved that question because all you have to do is look at a government agency.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so since I brought up the VREAL thing already, one of the things that we have done in the Zachary Leadership Program is try to give those engineering students kind of a crash course in thinking strategically, primarily from a business school perspective. And bringing in the VREAL framework has been part of that. And so I wanted to talk to you about what you've seen kind of being on the outside looking in terms of how that is working for the students and what you think it does or doesn't do when we're trying to introduce these concepts to students who are very much not part of the business school or anything other than engineering students.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to. I think it's been tremendously helpful. I'll start with that. I was trying to remember, I know we've done it the last 2 years. So maybe it was I guess you did it 1 year when I wasn't here, and then I joined and we did it 1 year without the VREAL. And then we've had VREAL for the last couple of years, I think is the way it's worked.
I think so.
But yeah, I've seen a big change, frankly, in the kind of the depth of the analysis the students can do since we introduced the VREAL to them. And I think part of it is, we've taught them things like the SWOT analysis and the business model canvas. And before VREAL, we really kind of focused on just those things. We did 5 forces a little bit, I think. But, those frameworks and models are good and helpful, and they can kind of help you think through different aspects of things. But I think for our students, at the end of doing those, they kind of felt like, well, how do these boxes all connect really? I've got things in boxes, but I'm not sure what to do with that now, and when we started introducing VREAL, and I don't know if you would agree, but this past fall in particular, as we introduced, or this spring, I guess, earlier this spring, when we introduced VREAL to this group and even last year's group too, that framework really lets them kind of tie everything together, I think, and think more holistically about the business. So I think one of the things I love about it and that the students really appreciate is that it takes all those things that are in boxes and it sews them together, and it helps them get a more complete picture of what's going on in business and what the business should be thinking about in the future, in a way that those other tools, it seems like, don't do quite as well.
Yeah, that's always been my hope, is that VREAL is not meant to replace, it's meant to focus and organize and prioritize. So I'm glad to hear that from your perspective looking in, you're seeing that happen. I must admit that sitting through the student presentations earlier this spring, when we asked them, if you were running this company, like if you were running Netflix or whatever, what would be key strategic issues that would leap out at you? I thought they were doing a pretty decent job for having a relatively short, few week long introduction to thinking about business and thinking about the problems of business. I was pretty impressed. I mean, obviously okay, they're not the same level as, our senior level strategy students right before they graduate or whatever, but they were very, very solid, and the things that they were saying made sense, and they were defensible. So
yeah.
I was pleased with that. So I'm glad that it's not just me kind of looking at that and thinking I see that, that you see that too.
No, I completely see that. And I think to even add a little bit more context for our listeners, these are sophomore engineering students. Most of them have not had any business instruction whatsoever. And I think you said that earlier, but, they are very much underclassmen, very much not yet taught about business stuff. You came in and spent a couple of class periods, I think, was really all kind of giving them a quick overview of some of this stuff. And then we told them to work on it. And yeah, they came back with some things that, I thought were pretty good considering that. And I really do think that VReal helps a lot with that, just in terms of, and that was the assignment. We asked them to think about themselves as kind of part of the C-suite of these companies, and to come back and make a presentation about what do you think the company needs to do in the future, and based on the current environment and what's going on in the company right now. And yeah, I thought that most of them came back with some really pretty decent ideas.
Yeah. I think every team had at least one idea that I could listen to and look at and go, yeah, that actually is something that makes sense. And, we could have a discussion about that.
That's right. And not all teams in the past have been that way. I mean, before we had VReal, we got some head scratchers.
Yeah. I think it probably helps them also that we give them the book, the Think Beyond Value, so that they have a chance to kind of read on their own a little bit too.
I think so too.
But I always enjoy working with the ZLP students. They're usually sharp. They're very inquisitive and participative and engaged, and so it's always been fun to do that. So thinking about kind of ZLP and VReal and all that kind of stuff, do you have any kind of lingering questions or issues that we could talk about in relationship to using VReal, or how people might incorporate this, or how you might use this in other contexts?
I think the first thing that comes to mind to me, you and I have kicked this around a little bit in the past, but it's something I would love. Maybe it's another coffee conversation, or maybe it's something we dive into a little bit now. I don't know. But, a lot of the work that they do with VReal and these company analysis kind of falls into their learning about the free enterprise system and business.
Right.
The leadership kind of aspect of the curriculum this semester is all about self-awareness. And so, we've batted around the idea of having them do a VReal of themselves in a way, but never really define that quite as well as I would like to. So, I think that is something, and I think you had some stories, if I remember right, about some organizations using the VReal model for more than just kind of a profitability strategic analysis thing, right? Wasn't there a nonprofit or two that had used it in some different way, or helping with families, wasn't it? Something with like a foster care?
We've had several not-for-profits use this to help them think about their strategy moving forward. We have had people use it within a family context, thinking about, how do we make better family decisions and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of personal development or a personal VReal, Janet Marcantonio, Dr. Marcantonio, who spearheads the individual leadership development track in our MBA program, has decided to use VReal with our MBA students for them to think about their careers, so to VReal themselves in relationship to their future careers. So it is being used in actually several different ways I never expected. But it might be an interesting thing for us to kick around some more and go into more detail, off podcast. But having the ZLP students do that about themselves and thinking about what life is going to be like post A&M for them.
Yeah, I think something like that might be really neat to do, even kind of coming off of an internship. I don't know about the business students, but the engineering students, I mean, they all do at least one internship. I think that's
Yeah.
even a requirement for graduation. And, it can be, I think there's a lot of good to forcing them to do an internship. It can certainly lead to a lot of anxiety too about A, getting the internship, and then B, getting the right internship, and then C, what to do after the internship and how to kind of figure out based on the internship what they want to do, for a full-time work or
Right.
what they want to pursue. So I wonder if something like VReal might be helpful to do kind of early in a fall semester, when most of them have done an internship over the summer and we kind of come back together while that experience is kind of fresh to think about just that question that you've just posed that Dr. Mark Antonio does with the MBA students. But, what is the thinking about their own value and all those other things? That could be a pretty neat exercise, I think.
Yeah. We'll have to talk some more about that. But
Let's do. Let's
okay.
do.
Okay. Anything else that you want to kick around while we're talking here?
Yeah, no, I think that's kind of the main thing, David. I just, certainly, like I said, I really enjoy bringing that to the students. I think it's added so much value to them, to their ability to kind of understand how businesses work and just start to think a little bit about how leaders in these organizations really do have to make decisions and how there's so many different things involved. And I think that's been pretty eye-opening for them. So I
Yeah.
appreciate you coming and spending time with our class every spring and teaching this material. I think it's fantastic.
Well, like I said, they're a fun group to work with. It makes it easy when you're in the classroom when the students are sharp and inquisitive and engaged. That's just so much fun.
Yeah, well, good. Well, I'm glad that that's been your experience with them. We enjoy having them in the program, and they're engineers, so sometimes it takes them a little while to to speak up and to ask questions and things like that. But it seems like we've got a pretty good group this year, and like I said, you just create such a great environment within the classroom that invites questions and critical thinking and everything. So I think that's a big part of it.
Well, they make it easy. One more thing though before we wrap up, because you did some consulting out there before you came back to A&M, can you give me a little bit of thought about the consulting world? And I use VReal in my consulting that I do with companies or entrepreneurs or individuals or whatever. I'm just interested in your perspective, having been out there and done that, and then now having been introduced to VReal and understanding it a little bit better. Would there have been a good synergy there for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there would have been. I'm thinking about a client that most of the consulting work I did was for intelligence agencies, and it was about kind of how to do intelligence analysis better and some critical thinking tools and techniques and things like that. And so, even with those, I think that they're kind of like we were talking about at the very beginning, there could have been some really interesting, I think, and helpful conversations that could have been centered around the model. But even towards the end of my time in consulting, I was mainly working with the Army Corps of Engineers and the real estate office within that organization. And they were kind of in an interesting spot where they were in a little bit of a time of transition in terms of, DC kind of control over things versus control from out in the field. And so, I think that pulling people together from that organization to talk about this probably could have been a pretty cool thing. That probably would have been pretty helpful for them to see the bigger picture of what the Corps was trying to do and what role they could play in it. And particularly, I think from DC they had an eye on some of these eroding factors, but I don't know that any of us really kind of clearly described that to the other people that were out in the field. So to have a model like this might have helped people see the big picture a little bit better.
Yeah, it's amazing what a little bit of common language, especially language
Mm-hmm.
that's easy, can help people understand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so too.
Well, so we're getting close to ending the regular podcast time here. I do want you to give anybody who happens to be listening to this podcast who is interested in the Zachary Leadership Program, learning more about it, maybe, if it was a student listening, wanting to know how to apply, or if it were parents listening, wanting to know more about, hey, should I get my child to try and get into this? So how do people get a hold of you and the Zachary Leadership Program?
Sure. Thanks for asking. So my email address is just seth.sullivan@tamu.edu. So seth.sullivan@tamu.edu. And we have a website. You can certainly just Google Zachary Leadership Program. That's probably the easiest way to find us. And we've got a site on the College of Engineering's homepage there. So would love to talk to anybody who's got any questions or comments or would like to learn more about the programs.
Okay, great. Well, once again, thanks a lot for taking the time in our COVID-19 self-quarantining world that we live in to get on this Zoom conversation and create another podcast for me.
Oh, I'm so glad to do it. Thanks for inviting me. And yes, you could hear my dog in the background. We're all working from home, so sorry about that. But yeah, thanks for inviting me, Dave. It's great to talk to you.
All right. Well, we'll talk to you later.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, that was a great conversation.
Yeah. Like with many people, I really enjoy talking with Seth. He just has a really kind of relaxed demeanor about him. I don't know if that came through in our conversation, but he just always sort of puts me at ease somehow.
Well, there might be some of that CIA training in there. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so.
It was a great conversation. I really wasn't aware of the Zachary Leadership Program and the details of it, and I certainly wasn't aware of how Seth and the team over there and you have been using VREL with these students, and it sounds like it's with really encouraging outcomes.
Yeah, it is a good program, and as I said in the interview, I've been happy to be part of it since it started up. And bringing VREL in over the last couple of years, I think it has made a difference, and I'm glad that Seth said that he was seeing that too. I started off the program just bringing in the traditional strategic management sort of concepts and some concepts from the entrepreneurship discipline, and that was to give the Zachary students an awareness of what we talk about over in the business school. But in the last couple of years, the goal in talking with Seth and all has been to try and give them a deeper understanding of the issues that you have to grapple with when you're trying to come up with good decisions inside of organizations. So I'm glad that he's seeing VREL being a real positive there.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I thought was just great to hear was that, of course, because they're teaching business principles there, that they're going and doing things, they're teaching SWOT and business model canvas, but as you would expect. But what he said really stood out to me that and we've run into this before, and it's really why you created the framework to begin with, is that they have those tools, and those are good tools, but it tended to leave the students with, and not just students, those of us in the real world, with a whole lot of information and not a clear direction as to what should we do about it. And it was interesting and encouraging for me to hear him say that the students then were able, once they had VREL to work with, they were able to tie everything together and kind of step back, see the big picture of the business, and have a really strong sense of what they should be thinking about in the future. And that's exactly the hope of VReal.
Right. And I liked his image of them having things in boxes. I guess I hadn't really thought about that picture in my head really before he said that. But it's true when you use a tool like, okay, let's do a Porter's 5 Forces industry analysis, or let's do the traditional SWOT, or let's do the VRIS or VRIN or VRIO. I mean, there's 3 different versions of resource-based view modeling there. But you do tend to end up with things in boxes. It's good information. You should do it. But like on the business model canvas, literally, you end up with things in boxes. The business model canvas has this canvas of paper with boxes on it, and you fill in things in the boxes. And so him saying that, when he said they can take things out of the boxes and put them together, I really, really like that. That's a great image. I want to hang on to that image.
No, that's great. It's encouraging. So then the other thing that really stood out, and really in speaking to our listeners, if you're working in an academic setting with students and have anything like this where you're trying to work in the leadership development, personal development, particularly with non-business students, as is the case of the Zachary Leadership Program at A&M, VReal has significant power, as we've seen, and as Seth has said, to help these students who really otherwise don't have a business background begin to think strategically about the businesses that they or have the ability to think strategically about the businesses that eventually they're going to be working in. But then also he said that he's thinking about now how he can use VReal also with those same students to help them understand how they as individuals can add value in any circumstance. And so that kind of VReal yourself is how we think about that. We have tools for that. But it's interesting that Seth is bringing that up as something that he wants to think about doing with his students. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. He and I maybe have only just briefly mentioned that to each other before talking today. So I'm glad he's thinking more about that. I really want to encourage people, not just Zachary Leadership Program people. I really want to encourage people to think about themselves in terms of how they're creating value in the world and how they can carve out their own set of distinctive competencies to move their careers forward. So having Seth bring that up today was just another good reminder for me and for all of us who are listening to these podcasts. This is a tool that is not just for an organization. This is a tool for an individual to use as well.
Yep, it really is. It's incredibly useful and valuable to know and understand, kind of reflect. And right now in this environment that we're in, where so many people are having to pivot as a company or as an individual because their normal source of or previous source of income is no more. It's not an opportunity anymore. VReal can be powerful to help you kind of reflect and look at, okay, what do I have to work with? What are my resources and capabilities that are available to me, and what is going on in the world where there's a need that you can apply those resources and capabilities to in order to create value, and really taking the time to understand where there is some potential for rareness.
Right.
Really, it's a powerful tool, and it's certainly timely. So anyway, great conversation with Seth, and he shared his contact information. We'll put that in the notes as well, but anybody who's out there looking to help students in an academic environment build their leadership skills, business skills, particularly for non-business students, we hope you'll consider VReal. To learn more about the VReal framework and the tools that we have available for free on our website at valuecreationco.com, you can visit that website and download some Be-Real yourself, Be-Real your company. We also, for the time being, we have made our workshop free. So we have an online video-based workshop. It's 5 modules. They go fairly quickly, and it's just designed to help you think through an idea or a project or your own personal ability to create value, your own personal opportunities right there. So all of that is available online at valuecreationco.com for free. And we just encourage you to dig deeper and certainly reach out to us if we can be of any help to you whatsoever.
Well, great. This was another good conversation. I just really enjoy having these conversations with people. So once again, for all of you out there listening, I hope this has been helpful to you. And if you want to contact us and if you think that we can be helpful to you, please feel free to contact us. And until the next podcast, I want you all to just keep thinking.